Panchakam. Just like last week, we'll do lead and repeat style, and then we'll come back around to the first and chant straight through verse 1, 2, and 3. Today, we will be getting into a little bit more abstract thought in the first half of verse number 3. So be a little prepared, be a little bit patient, but we'll slowly work through these concepts. All right? So with that, Sahana vavatu, sahano bhunaktu, saha viryam karavavahai, tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Gurur Brahma Gurur Vishnu Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha Gurureva Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. All right, so we'll do lead and repeat. We'll go slowly for all three verses. All right? Vedo nityam adhiyatam. Vedo nityam adhiyatam. Tadudidam. Karmasvanushthiyatam. Karmasvanushthiyatam. Teneshasya vidhiyatam. Neshasya vidhiyata. Apachitihi. Apachitihi. Kamye matistyajyatam. Kamye matistyajyatam. Papogaf paridhuyatam. Papogaf paridhuyatam. Bhavasukhe. Bhavasukhe. Dosho nusandhiyatam. Dosho nusandhiyatam. Atme cha vyavasiyatam. Cha vyavasiyatam. Nijagrahat. Nijagrahat. Turnam vinirgamyatam. Turnam vinirgamyatam. Sangat satsu vidhiyatam. Suvidhiyatam. Bhagavato. Bhaktir dridadhiyatam. Bhaktir dridadhiyatam. Shantyadif parichiyatam. Shantyadif parichiyatam. Dridataram. Dridataram. Karmashu santyajyatam. Karmashu santyajyatam. Sadvidvanupasripyatam. Sadvidvanupasripyatam. Pratidinam. Tadpaduka sevyatam. Paduka sevyatam. Brahmaikaksharamardhyatam. Shruti Shiro. Vakyam samakarnyatam. Vakyam samakarnyatam. Vakyarthasya vicharyatam. Vakyarthasya vicharyatam. Shruti Shiro. Sorry, my apology. Shruti Shiraf. Paksha samashriyatam. Dustarkat suviramyatam. Shrutimatas. Tarko nusandhiyatam. Brahmasmiti vibhavyatam. Brahmasmiti vibhavyatam. Aharahar. Garvav parityajyatam. Garvav parityajyatam. Deheham matirujyatam. Deheham matirujyatam. Buddha janair Vadav parityajyatam. So now let's go back to all three verses and chant right through. Vedo nityam adhiyatam tadudidam karma swanushtiyatam tene shasya vidhiyatam apachitihi kamye matistyajyatam papogav paridhuyatam bhavasukhe tosho nusandhiyatam atmecha vyavasiyatam nijagrahat turnam vinirgamyatam sangat satsu vidhiyatam bhagavato bhaktir dridadhiyatam shantyadif parichiyatam dridataram karmashu santyajyatam sadvidvanupasripyatam pratidinam tatpaduka sevyatam brahmaikaksharamardhyatam shrutishiro vakyam samakarnyatam vakyarthascha vicharyatam shrutishirav pakshassamashriyatam dustarkat suviramyatam shrutimatas tarkonusandhiyatam brahmasmiti vibhavyatam aharahar garvav parityajyatam deheham matirujyatam buddha janair vadav parityajyatam. All right, so we had seen, I wanted to take a step back today, just a little bit, not to review the whole thing, but just to come back to the approach of why we come to Hinduism and why we're at this stage in our sadhana of reaching or trying to understand the Jiva Brahma Aikya. So I wanted to bring that context back together here again. When we are living in this life and when we are living in this world, all of our efforts are usually driven by two purposes. This is now just simply vyavaharically as a mundane materialistic individual trying to strive to achieve success in this life. What are we motivated by? Two things. Dukkha nivritti and sukha prapti. Dukkha is sadness, agitation, the negativities. I don't want anything to do with it. Nivritti. Sukha, may I always have happiness. So I always want to grab and have sukha. So sukha prapti. Now, in fact, Puja Gurudev says this is not just for an individual living their day-to-day life in a microscope kind of vision of my own life. This principle applies to the macrocosm of the entirety of humanity in all time. He says, all milestones in the history of human progress are nothing but a victory over a particular source of unhappiness. All of mankind's progress in all of time, simply because of this, I don't want to be unhappy. I want to be happy, I don't want to be unhappy. Simple equation. But when we are digesting and processing the challenges of life, and we really are looking for where is happiness, we get into some problems. Simple analysis is when we look at the world, is it the source of happiness? Is happiness there or not? Because if it's not there, why would I go searching for it? So if we do a simple analysis, let's take the world to be made up of objects, people, and circumstances. You think that covers bases of, when I say world, does it account for everything? Objects, people, and circumstances. Now, is happiness located in objects? Yes or no? Why? Why not? So the idea or the logic is, let's test it out. if, let's assume objects do have happiness in there, then it should be there no matter who encounters it. So the best example I take is mint chocolate. Mint chocolate. Just how many of you actually like mint chocolate? Like you don't mind it? It's okay. How many of you don't like that taste? Yeah, that's the majority. Why? To me, it tastes like toothpaste, honestly. I didn't wash my teeth and then ate a chocolate. That's what it tastes like to me. Well, okay, if you told me that this sweet, this dessert is supposed to bring happiness, and we're all, oh, I wish I had chocolate today. I wish I have dessert. We have a desire for it. Why? Because I think there's happiness in it. Well, then, shouldn't we all have the same experience if happiness was located in that chocolate? It's something different. So it's not there. Then also, for the same person, the same object would also not contain the same level of happiness all the way through. The first bucket of chocolate, it tastes great. And I go eat the second bucket, third bucket, seventh bucket, same person, same like, same desire for that chocolate. By the end of it, what's my experience? Sickness, I'm throwing up. So that object still doesn't have that happiness in there. So then we come to the next layer saying, okay, fine, you're right. Objects, people, circumstances, the happiness is not there. We all say it has to be somewhere inside. Okay, even if it's on the inside, how exactly do I experience that happiness? When we maintain a certain relationship or connection, it invokes that experience. So having the right contact with the world outside seems to be the equation. Now, if I were to mess with the world, constantly fuss with objects, peoples, and circumstances, and constantly keep arranging it in such a way that I gain experience, is that a fruitful effort? Will it give me permanent happiness for the rest of my life? We all think it will. That's why we keep working until retirement, saying I will make sure that I have enough reservoir of wealth, I have the right house, right car, right circumstances, and I navigate through relationships to make sure I have the right people around me. How long will that last? Even then, constantly catering to my mind's desires, trying to invoke that inside, is not satisfying. So then we come to the point where you say, this is not going to work. I need to find where is that true happiness. Where can I find it? That's when we come to religion and we say, science and mathematics, secular, approaches to things, we haven't found a solution. Religion, you seem to talk about things that are beyond science. You seem to talk about things that even I can't come to understand or logically come to. What do you have to offer? Can you show me where happiness truly is? So that is why we say Shastra is alaukika vishaya. I may have mentioned this last time. Alaukika vishaya is Vishaya means subject matter. Not Vishaya as in Kannada as in poison. It means subject matter. Loka means worldly. So things that are within this world, I can figure it out. I use my senses, I use my inferences, I use experimentation. I can figure out what's going on in this world. Alaukika. You throw that little prefix in there. Not within this world. So if it's not within this world, then I cannot use my mind and intellect. I cannot use my senses. I need a different means of understanding that subject matter. That is why Shastras become important. They are the pramana for alaukika vishaya. Now you tell me there is this thing called the self. Atma, Brahma, Paramatma. These are synonyms. That self is the source of your happiness. This is the ultimate statement. We saw last time, Jiva, Brahma, Aikya. Why are we even doing all these equations and all that? Because you are that substratum, you are that self, you are the very principle of bliss. Where did this whole conversation start? I'm looking for happiness. Shastras tell me you are that very principle that gives rise to happiness. Okay, then if that's there, then how do I experience this? Then in a more, and you said this is too abstract, can you give it to me a little bit more experiential wise? He said, fine. Even that feeling of happiness comes when the mind comes to a peaceful state. When you remove agitations from that mind, that self will reflect through you like, the sunlight reflecting off of a clean mirror. You know how light up the whole room? In the same way, that self will reflect through your mind. When it is completely clean, you will see that joy expressing through you. So Shastras also give us that connection. But even then, it's still hard to experience that. You're telling me all of this, but how do I know it's true? So that's why we talked about last week, Shraddha. Shraddha becomes an important mindset that we need to have it before we approach the Shastras. We can't be like our students nowadays saying, no, prove to me that the self exists, and then maybe I'll test out meditation. Prove to me that Bhagwan is all powerful, show me that, and then maybe I'll go sit and do puja. We can't do it that way because we won't know what the truth is unless we give it a shot. So the analogy I always come back to is recipes. You can go and search, go to Gordon Ramsay and knock on his kitchen and saying, give me a recipe for your best meal. Once you gain that and they give you that statement of recipe, can you say, prove to me this is tasty? Only then shall I test out this recipe. That makes no sense. You have to actually take the recipe, cook it yourself, and then you yourself will prove that if it's right or wrong. You can't just sit around and say, no, I won't have Shraddha in this recipe. You prove to me intellectually that this is true. That's not how it works. So in the same way, when we come to our Shastras, let us take these statements as fact. Self is apparently all-powerful, the source of bliss. And when I have a peaceful, agitation-free mind, it will express that blissful state. Okay, this is the principle that's being given. What do I have to do now? Work on my mind, work on clearing all the agitations, waiting and seeing what reflects through. That's self-application. So, how do we start working on this? We say that, let me back up just 1 second. When people come to us and ask us, what is religion? What is Hinduism? Don't we have a hard time trying to figure out how to answer that? It's a way of life, it's a standard of living, we have certain gods, we have certain principles and philosophy, and you tell them, I am Brahman, and they're like, what's Brahman? Is that the same as Brahman? So you suddenly get really confused, you're like, how do I explain all this in one go? Really, if we had to simplify and somebody were to come to us and say, what is religion? What is Hinduism? It is a systematic approach in training the mind and mastering the self. There's a definition to hold on to explain religion. It is a system to help master the self, to train the mind and gain perfect mastery over the self. This is the focus of religion. Now, why are we doing this? Because we want to see what is our true nature and have to settle that mind to make sure it reflects. How do I do this now? We have our 3 forms or 3 yogas that we follow through. 3 yogas. Now, just like how I asked the students in the assembly, which one comes first? You should be able to answer this now. There we go. Thank you for that one. Yes, selfless action. Or in Sanskrit terms, what would it be called? Karma. Not seva. Yes, karma yoga. Karma yoga is the essence of that. First comes karma yoga. Then what comes next? I know in assembly we skip 2. What's the other of the 2 paths? What's the second path that they always say? Renunciation. And Sanskritam word for that is? Sannyasa. Or Jnana Yoga would be the other one. There's one thing in the middle that we tend to skip. You have Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga. What belongs in the middle? Bhakti Yoga. So if we think about it, this progression from Karma Yoga to Bhakti Yoga to Jnana Yoga is the systematic approach of training the mind. So we'd seen in verse 1 and 2, they accommodated for both Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. Karma Yoga, Uncle, as you mentioned, was selfless action dedicated to a higher purpose. This is when I follow dharma. This is when I grow out of my desires. So today, in the last verse of this chapter we saw, when a sannyasi is sitting in the seat of meditation, he is free from 3 things: desires, fears, and anger. Ichha, bhaya, and krodha. These 3 things he's able to clear away. Because if we look at the nature of desires comes because of some miscalculation in the world. Desires come from a miscalculation in the world. Because I think people, circumstances, and objects, if I arrange it just right, I'll get happiness. Therefore, I have desires to arrange it in such a way. That miscalculation that happiness is out there is what gives rise to desires. Now, when that arrangement is not possible, and I'm not able to, and people obstruct me, or I'm afraid of losing the arrangement I've set up, what are the two natural products of desire? Bhaya and krodha. So when I'm practicing karma yoga, it's to resolve these desires. Look, the world doesn't have it. Let me practice it by thinking of desires that are selfless. It's a weird conundrum. Selfless desires. Desires is based off of the self. And so it's kind of this wonky technique where we're undoing our desires. May I put others before me? Therefore, I will think less about me, and therefore I will undo the desires I have. This is the purpose of karma yoga, and we say this develops chitta shuddhi. Now, after I have chitta shuddhi, I have constantly given to others, I'm settled. At this point, I have to sharpen the mind. That is when bhakti yoga becomes really important. Bhakti yoga is for sharpening the mind. And we saw this in verse number 2 when we investigated the Vanaprastha ashrama. I take up upasana, I take up japa, and I develop that relationship with Bhagavan so that my mind, out of love, can stay put in one place. And stay put in one place. After having all of this, then I'm ready for Jnana Yoga. Now, this verse we're looking at today, verse number 3, we're really getting into the depths of Jnana Yoga. What do I do when I'm trying to understand the nature of that self? Now, before I get into that, I wanted to give you an analogy to hold on to keep this information together so that you can recall it when you're thinking about this process. Say that there's a lake. There's a lake, and someone tossed a diamond into that lake. We're not talking like 5-carat diamond, it's a tiny one. So 1-carat diamond, single like the self. You toss that in there. But once it's tossed and I'm trying to look for it, there are 3 problems that will arise that will block me from seeing that diamond. 3 problems. First one is, there's too much mud in that pond. I can't see past the surface. It's too muddy. Second problem is the wind is really gusting around and there's some sort of current underneath. It's constantly moving. There's ripples. So I can't even see past the ripples. Third problem is, let's say that even the mud was removed, the water was calm. I look at the bottom of the bank. I can't tell the difference between a shiny coin and that diamond. I'm not able to identify exactly which one is the diamond that's on the bottom. 3 problems. These 3 are related to each of these yogas. So karma yoga, that is chitta shuddhi, I have to purify. So just like the muddy water, I have to purify the water and remove all of the mud. What does the mud represent then? You can take a guess. What are we trying to remove? And what's the source of fear and anger? Desires. So if anything, all we're doing is removing desires. That is karma yoga, chitta shuddhi. That's like removing the mud. Then after that, we said, what was the second problem? The ripples. Ripples is the constant movement of the mind. It jumps from one thing to the next topic, constantly contemplating one after the other. We have to let it learn to settle down and be in one place and come to a standstill. So then bhakti yoga, i.e. upasana, develops chitta ekagrataha, which is like stilling the water and letting it come to a single point. Okay, now we still have one more problem. Mind has been purified, mind has become single pointed. When I look, try to find and identify that diamond. What does that diamond represent? Self. That true nature, that Paramatma, that Atma, that is who I am. That is the diamond that I'm looking for. How am I able to identify that this is the diamond and not something else? It's not a shiny coin. It's not the glimmering of a pearl on the bottom. It's not a rock. How do I know that this is the diamond and not something else? How do I know that this is the self and not the jiva? How do I know that this is the self and not the body? How do I know that this is the self and not the mind? I have to start separating what I'm not from what I am. That process is the effect of Jnana Yoga, and we say we're developing Sukshmatvam. Sukshmatvam. Sukshma means to become really subtle. I'm able to grapple with the subtleties of who I am. How do I separate that I am not my own thoughts? I am the witness of my own thoughts. That takes some real subtle techniques of the mind that's very difficult to do on our own. This is the logic and process of Jnana Yoga. So again, that analogy I think is a really good way to grasp all three yogas. Mud, ripples, and the shiny object. Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and Jnana Yoga. Then upon going through all these three, then I know exactly what to take up and take and become that self. So now let's look into verse number 3 where we were. Vakyarthasya vicharyatam shruti shiraf pakshas samashryatam dustarkat suviramyatam shruti matas tarkonusandhiyatam. So I'm taking, there are like 4 parts to this, 4 or 5 parts, and these are the first 2 lines of verse number 3. So Vakyarthasya, we saw Vakya. The most important statement of the Upanishad is what we're focused on. Not getting lost in the 4 Vedas, the Karma Kanda, Upasana Kanda, Aranya Kanda. There's a whole lot built in there, but we're not focused on that. We let that do its purpose beforehand. We come all the way to Vedanta, the end of the Vedas, i.e. the Upanishads, and even more specifically, the Mahavakyas within the Upanishads. Vakyarthasya vicharyatam. Reflect upon the meaning of those commandments. Now, while I am taking up that understanding, I have to make sure that Shruti Shiraf Pakshas Samashriyatam. Let's look into that just for a little bit here. The word Paksha becomes a very important word here. Shruti Paksha. Paksha means a side or an angle. So whenever we're looking at studying the depths of the knowledge being given, and I'll take the example of Gita. Gita, has everyone heard of Gita Bhashya? Bhashya of the Gitas. How many have not, just so I'm sure? Okay. So what happens is when the verses are given, like for example in chapter 2 of Gita, Bhagavan says, you are that self. That self cannot kill, nor can it be killed. The self can burn, but the self cannot be burned. Or he'll say that, I am the self of the self. So like that, there are so many descriptions that come in Gita, and we're sitting there thinking, how do I digest this? What do you mean that the self doesn't act? What do you mean that things don't happen to the self? If the self is the world, then does it not act? So all of these confusions start to come up. So Adi Shankaracharya ji, the guru, and both of Sadhana Panchakam, he sat with the Gita and took every single word and gave an explanation of what is the meaning of this word. In this particular verse, when we say Atma, it means the mind. In this other verse, when you see the word Atma, it means that self. Then in a different verse, when you see Atma, it's referencing Jiva, that ego or that individual. Subtleties. Then he explains what does control mean, what does the self mean, what does the body mind mean. He gives elaborate explanations. That's why we say it is Bhashya. Bhashya means words, but literally it means I give an explanation of what those are, and his explanations are in Sanskritam. So during the Vedanta course, we had to learn Gita Bhashya all the way at the end after we've learned a little bit of Sanskritam. And it was really hard to grapple with. But what we had discovered, not only does he give explanations, but he does something interesting in certain points within Gita. You open the verse and there's like 3 pages of Sanskritam Bhashya, and you're like, dude, it's only 2 lines. Why do you have so much commentary? What is this about? There, in those particular sections, we see that there's this dialogue that happens, like 2 figment people talking to each other in that commentary. And there we saw one person is bringing up a point, an objection, and there's another person who is answering that. And what are the names given to these people? The one who brings up an objection is called a Purva Paksha. Sorry, that's why I'm landing into this point. That word Paksha becomes really important. It is someone who is bringing up an objection from the other side. Purva Paksha is the one who brings up an objection from the other side. So who's the one that's answering and addressing and solving and resolving those issues? They're given the word Siddhanta. They're Siddha. They're established in this logic of thinking. They're the ones giving a solution to the objection that was brought. Now, why did I go into all of this? Because this sentence here, Shruti Shiraha Paksha Samashriyatam. Shruti Shira. We saw that last time. The head of the Shruti means the Upanishad. From the Upanishadic standpoint, again, standpoint translates to Paksha. From the standpoint of the Upanishad, Samashriyatam, take refuge in that standpoint. So, this is now when we have to expand our understanding of Sanatana Dharma and Advaita philosophy and spirituality. Have we heard of the 6 Shat Darshanas of Hinduism? Yes, no? Give me a thumbs up. Yes, no, I've not heard of it ever before. Okay, cool. So, 6 darshanas. When you approach these scriptures and they're trying to do the equation between Jiva, Brahma, Aikya, you need to investigate who is the Jiva, what is the nature of the Jiva, who is Brahman, and what is the nature of Brahman. You have to do that investigation. But it's very complex and subtle, and a lot of times the logic can be different. So when someone is trying to understand it, there were 6 different interpretations that came out of trying to study the same Gita. 6 different interpretations. Each of those are called as darshanas. So the 6 that came about that are most common is, let me make sure I have my correct list so I don't make mistakes. Nyaya, Sankhya, Yoga, Vaisheshika, Mimamsa, and Uttara Mimamsa. These are the 6. Nyaya, Sankhya, Yoga, Vaisheshika, Mimamsa, and Uttara Mimamsa. So when we say we are Advaita, we study Upanishad, we come from Adi Shankaracharya, which one of these 6 are we a part of then? We are part of Uttara Mimamsa. Uttara Mimamsa. So now let's bring that into this context here. When we say there's an objection being given to a certain concept, meaning it's coming from one of these standpoints of interpretation, the other side of one of these 6. When they give an objection, where should we be and how should our logic be? Be part of Siddhanta. So this vocabulary is, we are in alignment with Adi Shankaracharya in the way he presents information in Gita Bhashya. We stand from the darshana of Uttara Mimamsa in alignment with Advaita Vedanta, and as objections come up, we use our Siddhanta to address the objections that come up. So when you say Shruti Shiro Paksha Samashriyatam, I'm following from this. Now we might throw up our hands saying, hey, whoa. I'm still figuring out my Shraddha. Why is it that I have to be in Uttara Mimamsa? Why can't I stand on yoga? Here, yoga means Patanjali Sutra Yoga. Why can't I be there and address all these issues? Okay, if I want to be really awesome and become scholarly in Hinduism, I'm going to make it a goal. I'm going to study all 6. I will learn all 6 Siddhantas and then come to a firm standpoint saying, I know my Shastras. So the Guru, Swamiji I was listening to address that. He's like, dude, do you know how long it takes to study even one darshana? To have one set of logic in understanding who is Jiva, who is Brahma, and seeing if Aikya is even a possibility. It takes so long. Is there any shortcut? Is there any way we can go about this? He said, yes. Think about it this way. He gave the example of a pole. A pole, if there's a cement pole or a pillar that we want to establish, how do we do it? We have to go dig up the dirt, put in the pole, pack it in, and we make sure that the ground is fully packed. But how do you know it's firm? You have to test it by taking the pole and shaking it a little bit, right? If it moves, the soil is still loose. There's still some gaps. And you have to go pack it back in, test it again. Keep going, testing, and then finally you'll see pole is firm. Nobody's going to move this. That's just the analogy. Bear with me a little bit here. How do I apply this analogy now? Take one of the darshanas and be firm in that. To make sure you're firm, test it, shake it by seeing if your Siddhanta addresses the objection that's being given. So Shruti Shiro is also a very important point. The most ultimate standpoint, the last statements, Vedanta and Upanishad is the Shiraha of the Shrutis. That is what Uttar Mimamsa is focused on. What do the Upanishads have to say? Come to that point, stand in Uttara Mimamsa, stand in Advaita Vedanta, be firm in that philosophy, now go test it in all the other 6 darshanas. Does your Siddhanta hold true? That is why we say take refuge in the truth of Brahman. Shruti Shiro Paksha Samashriyatam. Don't waste too much time trying to believe in all 6. Start with one, be established, test with the other, and of all of them, start with Advaita Vedanta because it is the culmination of all logic. Maybe next time when we have a little bit more time, we can talk about Dvaita, Vishishta Advaita, and Advaita philosophy, because that's a big question that always comes up. What is the difference between Madhvacharya and Ramanuja and Adi Shankaracharya? Why is there 3 philosophy? How do they work together? We'll address that a little bit later. But know that it is Advaita, where we say it is one and the same. There is no duality. Now, when it comes to one last point, and then we'll move on to the next section here. When it comes, I'll give you an example of how to test the theories. When we defined the self, that Paramatma, as Sat, Chit, Ananda, Ekam, Advayam. These are the principles that we have. We say that that self is only one and it is conscious. Only one and it is conscious. The other darshanas will disagree with one point or the other. Some will say it is inert and one. Others will say it is inert but many. Then the other combination is it is one but inert. And then finally our sampradaya will say it is one and sentient. I know these are still vague terminologies, but I'm just giving you an example. Now you have to say, if Paramatma is all pervasive in all consciousness, how can there be many? How can you have many from that standpoint? Sentiency. How can something sentient come out of something insentient? Okay, so the example I was going to take is, let's go back to biology, especially when they talk about creation, right? What is the theory? That these inert chemicals, like hydrogen, carbon, oxygen, they happened by chance to coordinate themselves in such a way that they created organic molecules. It is still chemical. Then apparently they organized themselves in such a way that they created the first cell, simple cell. And that cell then evolved into multi-cell organism, and it kept evolving, and suddenly you have organisms and the whole Darwin evolution series. Now, I want to come back to that junction. How can you say that something that is inert, like dirt or chemicals, turn into something that is sentient or living? How can something living come out of something that is not living? So that's a question that we can ask. That's what I mean by sentient or insentient. Something that is alive and conscious versus something that is not conscious. That is what inert is. So some philosophies say, yeah, you have a substance that is inert, that does not have consciousness, but it can lead to consciousness. That, you would say, science believes that. But does that really make any sense? How can something come from nothing? How can consciousness come from a place that had no consciousness? Something doesn't seem right. That is why our Advaita Vedanta Siddhanta says, no, You have to have something. You have to have something that is conscious, and then another conscious being can come out of it. So the self is chitta. It has always been ever aware of itself. So when it manifests through an individual, a human being can have consciousness. Animals can have consciousness. Then you can also have rocks. Rocks also contain consciousness, but because they don't have the mind and intellect to express it, you don't see it, but it's there. Some of these examples are taken up when we look at Ramayana. Ahalya Devi, what was she before when she was cursed? She was a stone. But when Sri Ramchandraji touched his foot on her, she suddenly became a human being. Because that sentient living being was already contained in it, it required some stimulation to express itself, and therefore a sentient being can come from an insentient being because the ultimate substratum had that conscious principle in the first place. So again, these are all like complicated and subtle ideas, and this is I'm just touching the surface of the logic that's given in the Shrutis. So this, as we advance through our texts, as you take up things like Gita, especially chapter 2, chapter 15, they touch upon these topics. Kshetra, Kshetrajna, there's a chapter that talks about sentiency versus insentiency, Prakriti versus Purusha. They tackle these topics there. When you go into Brahma Sutras, they delve even deeper into these concepts. How do I define consciousness? How do I define inconsciousness? How do I define what is inert and what is not inert? So there's a lot. I'm only touching the surface, but these are some of the logics that are presented there. So we have to stand from Advaita standpoint and test the other darshanas to see if they're true. Therefore, we can be efficient with our time and our studying. Yes? All right. So we saw the first instruction was Vedo Nityam Adhiyatam, right? So it is important to have an eye on Jnana Yoga. So in very short words, yes, let's stay focused on Karma Yoga. That will be 99% of the way we should live our life as we go forward. But always maintain some level of connection with Jnanam. That's why we come to Chinmay Mission. That is why Puja Gurudev brought Gita and Upanishad. He didn't take any other text. He brought straight up Upanishads here because, it's actually a very good question. This was one of the topics we tackled in Teacher Satsang. There is one principle. Whenever we're challenged in life and we get sucked into being our ego and having to deal with the competitions of life and the materialistic rat race and what goes on, Puja Gurudev in one of his sentences said, find ways to grow or rise above your ego and identify with the totality of the universe and the entirety of humankind. When we shift our vision, we are able to see that our problems dissolve on its own. Now, in order for me to have that vision, do I not need to understand the Siddhanta of we are one and the self in all? I need to come to understand who is this ego in order to rise above the ego. So in order to continue my education on having the right perspective in the world, I do need to stay in touch with these philosophies. That will aid me to be more motivated in my karma yoga. So the sentence I keep drilling into the kids after I ask them all the questions in the assembly is, when we perform karma yoga well, you will end up in jnana yoga. So yes, we do have to educate ourselves on both aspects. Work is in karma yoga, vision is in jnana yoga. I hope that answered that question. Yeah? So it does become subtle. it does become abstract, and a lot of times we'll end up asking, how does this become relevant in my day-to-day life? And the one principle I've learned is vision matters. When my understanding of what the nature of the world is, my interactions with it will naturally change. My contact with the world outside will change. The same thing will no longer affect me the way it used to. Yes? Let me clarify that particular statement. I'm specifically saying that in the Gita Bhashya, the Purva Pakshas or all the other 5 darshana, the Siddhanta is Uttara Mimamsa, which is Advaita Vedanta from Adi Shankaracharyaji's standpoint. I just wanted to clarify that in my... So when we are studying Gita Bhashya, when they say Siddhanta, Siddhanta means it is Adi Shankaracharyaji speaking from the darshana of Uttara Mimamsa. Purva Pakshas are all the other 5. Yes. Yes. Does that clarify? Okay. Okay. Fair enough. So, okay. So the next sentence is, having understood this relationship in interpretation of the material presented in the Upanishad, let's take refuge in one and make sure that it gets tested out by the other darshanas. That's why you say, Shruti Shiro Paksha Samasriyatam. Now, after that, the next sentence is Dustarkat Suviramyatam. Dustarkat. The logics or tarka, the approach in logical, should not be averse. Last time we'd seen the different types of arguments you can have, right? One is Vada, Samvada. A guru who is knowledgeable is giving you certain logic, and the student is asking genuine questions for clarification. Good Vada that's going on. Then you have 2 students that are trying to understand the truth. That's their goal for having an argument. So they can talk and discuss, okay, is the jiva sentient or not sentient? Well, here's one example that disproves that it is sentient or insentient. So you can have arguments amongst each other, but you're seeking the truth. Those are all good logic. Then there are others that, Vitanda and, I'm forgetting the last one. Anyway, the definition of the 2 is, one has a standpoint saying, I have to prove you wrong. I have to prove you, I don't care what the truth is. I just want to come out on top. Therefore, I shall argue with me. That is also dustarka. Use all sort of logic just to win, not to seek the truth. Then there's the other one where the guy doesn't even have a standpoint. He doesn't care what side. He doesn't have a standpoint. He just wants to argue with you, and he just wants to put you down. If you say A, he'll say B. If you say B, he'll say C. He has no standpoint on his own. He just wants to prove you wrong. So that's the last kustarka. So we have to be careful on how we argue, how we digest these logic that's there. Finally, it says, Shruti matas tarko anusandhiyatam. So this last line connects back with what we were talking about. Mataha. Shruti mataha tarka anusandhiyatam. So have we heard of you have mathas in India, you have Sringeri Matha, so on and so forth, right? The word matha is slightly off of this word here, mata. Mata comes from the word manas or man, to consider or to think. So it is the system of logic or system of thinking as presented by the Shruti. Shruti mataha tarkaha. So the logics presented by the system of thinking as said in the Upanishad. 3 words, long sentence. Logic presented in the system of thinking as presented by the Upanishad, that I will follow. Anusandhiyatam. So it is again a reference of what Siddhanta should be established in to then follow along. So the whole point here is, the way to start studying Jnana Yoga, way to start studying the Shruti. We have to let go of previous standpoints we have. I am secular, I am scientific, I only believe it if you tell me in modern terms. We have to let go of all of those things, reframe our mind to start understanding the vocabulary that's being used. What does jiva mean? What does the koshas mean? What does the avastatraya, the states of experience? All this vocabulary, I just have to first learn. After that, we have to learn what is their approach to scientifically categorizing this world. This body is made up of the 5 elements, made up of the 3 gunas. Maya is the trigunatmika, the one who holds the 3 gunas. There's a framework of understanding this world. May I come in alignment with it, follow it logically. Then, after having understood its description of the world, what is its relation to the substratum? Why am I searching for this substratum? May I follow that logic as well? In Viveka Chudamani is a great, just read the table of contents of Viveka Chudamani. You don't even have to go into all the details. You'll see the progression of thought laid out clearly. Starts with, why should I be born as a human being? What should my mind be like in order to approach the Shastras? Once I start, it goes through what is the definition of Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha, Manomaya Kosha, so on, the 5 sheets. What is the 3 states of experience, Avastatraya? Then it comes to the junction of where can I find happiness? What am I to do? Then the Guru starts the Upadesha saying, you are not this, you are not this, you are not this. Then you enter the seat of meditation. These are aids to meditation. I am Brahman. I am all pervasive. I am all encompassing. I have no gunas. I have no end. I have no beginning. These are things we say to come to recognize our true state. And then it even explains the experience of realization. And then the Guru comes back saying, Shishya, you have succeeded. Now go and serve and teach others. So if you just want to see the logic of development, take up just the table of content of Viveka Chudamani and go through the logic that's presented there. So anyway, the first 2 parts of, first 2 lines of verse 3 is approaching how do I study jnana? How do I study the Shrutis with the right mental state? Now after this, and we'll see this next week, we will see now the application. How do I start practicing these subtle ideas? We see become absorbed in the attitude of I am Brahman, renounce the pride, give up this delusory misconception called I am the body, and give up this tendency to argue with wise men. So now the self-application. We will truly start to see the definition of what meditation and nididhyasana is all about in this next section that's coming up. So thank you for bearing with me. I know this was not an easy topic. Even I was like, oh, this is really complex and I don't know all of it. Even the Siddhantas I'm not too sure about, but at least it gives us a glimpse as to where all of this is and how do we approach it. So thank you for bearing with me. And I hope to see everyone here sign up for at least to host a puja at their home. If not, join the Gita chanting competition. We tell our kids to go chanting, but we can give them encouragement by ourselves saying, hey, I've signed up, so you also do it with me. So please take accountability and you also join. It's okay, you don't have to win, you don't have to succeed, you don't have to win that competition. It's the practice itself that matters. So please do join and take part in all the opportunities that came up. So with that, last question. If you have young children that you need to go pick them up, please go ahead, feel free. Structure of the puja at home. So I'm leading these efforts. So I will, once you sign up, I will send you the instructions of how to set up the puja, what the puja vidhi will be, and I'll be there, Hariji will be there to actually conduct the puja. So we will walk you through it, and you'll just be the yajaman, and then we'll have satsang, and I'll send all the details as soon as you sign up. Okay? All right, so with that, Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. All right, thank you so much.